The Norse story, The Children of Odin, is brought to you by notaprofit.org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. The Children of Odin, Part 10, Section Roman 4, Chapter 3. The story of Sigmund and Signy. He called to Granny, his proud horse. He stood up on a mound in the heath, and he sent forth a great shout. And Granny heard in the cave where Regin had left him, and he came galloping to Sigurd with flowing mane and eyes flashing fire. He mounted Gram, and he rode to Fafnir's cave. When he went into the place where the dragon was wont to lie, he saw a door of iron before him. With Gram, his mighty sword, he hewed through the iron, and with his strong hands he pulled the door back. Then, before him, he saw the treasure the dragon guarded, masses of gold and heaps of shining jewels. But as he looked on the hoard, Sigurd felt some shadow of the evil that lay over it all. This was the hoard that in the far off days, the river, maidens watched over as it lay deep under the flowing water. Then Andvari the dwarf forced the river, maidens to give it to him, and Loki had taken it from Andvari, letting loose as he did Gulveig the witch who had such evil power over the gods. For the sake of the hoard, Fafnir had slain Hreidmar, his father, and Regin had plotted death against Fafnir, his brother. Not all this history did Sigurd know, but a shadow of its evil touched his spirit as he stood there before the gleaming and glittering heap. He would take all of it away, but not now. The tale that the birds told was in his mind, and the green of the forest was more to him than the glitter of the treasure heap. He would come back with chests and load it up and carry it to King Alv's hall. But first he would take such things as he himself might wear. He found a helmet of gold, and he put it on his head. He found a great armring, and he put it around his arm. On the top of the armring there was a small fingering with a rune graved upon it. Sigurd put it on his finger. And this was the ring that Andvari the dwarf had put the curse upon when Loki had taken the hoard from him. He knew that no one would cross the heath and come to Fafnir's lair, so he did not fear to leave the treasure unguarded. He mounted Gram, his proud horse, and rode toward the forest. He would seek the house of flame where she lay sleeping, the maiden who was the wisest and the bravest and the most beautiful in the world. With his golden helmet shining above his golden hair, Sigurd rode on. As he rode toward the forest he thought of Sigmund, his father, whose slaying he had avenged, and he thought of Sigmund's father, Volsung, and of the grim deeds that the Volsungs had suffered, and wrought. Rerir, the son of Siggy, who was the son of Odin, was the father of Volsung, and Volsung, when he was in his first manhood, had built his hall around a mighty tree. Its branches went up to the roof and made the beams of the house, and its great trunk was the center of the hall. The Branstock, the tree was called, and Volsung Hall was named the Hall of the Branstock. Many children had Volsung, 11 sons and 1 daughter. Strong were all his sons and good fighters, and Volsung of the Hall of the Branstock was a mighty chief. It was through Signy, the daughter of the house, that a feud and a deadly battle was brought to Volsung and his sons. She was a wise and a fair maiden, and her fame went through all the lands. Now, one day Volsung received a message from a king asking for the hand of Signy in marriage. And Volsung, who knew of this king through report of his battles, sent a message to him saying that he would be welcome to the hall of the Branstock. So King Siggeir came with his men, but when the Volsungs looked into his face they liked it not. And Signy shrank away, saying, "This king is evil of heart and false of word." Volsung and his 11 sons took counsel together. Siggeir had a great force of men with him, and if they refused to give her, he could slay them all and harry their kingdom. Besides, they had pledged themselves to give Signy when they had sent him a message of welcome. Long counsel they had together, and 10 of Signy's brothers said, "Let Signy wed this king. He is not as evil as he seems in her mind." 10 brothers said it. But one spoke out, saying, "We will not give our sister to this evil king." Rather let us all go down fighting with the hall of the Branstock flaming above our heads." It was Sigmund, the youngest of the Volsungs, who said this. But Signy's father said, "We know not of evil of King Siggeir. Also our word is given to him. Let him feast with us this night in the hall of the Branstock, and let Signy go from us with him and his wife." Then they looked to her, and they saw Signy's face, and it was white and stern. "Let it be as ye have said, my father and my brothers." She said, "I will wed King Siggeir and go with him over seas." So she said aloud, but Sigmund heard her say to herself, "It is woe for the Volsungs." A feast was made, and King Siggeir and his men came to the hall of the Branstock. Fires were lighted, and tables were spread, and great horns of mead went around the guests. In the middle of the feasting, a stranger entered the hall. He was taller than the tallest there, and his bearing made all do him reverence. One offered him a horn of mead, and he drank it. Then, from under the blue cloak that the wore, he drew a sword that made the brightness of the hall more bright. He went to the tree that the hall was built around, to the Branstock, and he thrust the sword into it. All the company were hushed. Then they heard the voice of the stranger, a voice that was like the trumpet's call. "The sword is for the hand that can draw it out of the Branstock." Then he went out of the hall. All looked to where the sword was placed, and saw a hand's breadth of wonderful brightness. This one and that one would have laid hands on the hilt. Only Volsung's voice bade them stand still. "It is meet," he said, "that our guest and our son-in-law, King Siggeir, should be the first to put hands on its hilt and try to draw the sword of the stranger out of the Branstock." King Siggeir went to the tree and laid his hands on the broad hilt. He strove hard to draw out the sword, but all his might could not move it. As he strained himself to draw it and failed, a dark look of anger came into his face. Then others tried to draw it, the captains who were with King Siggeir, and they, too, failed to move the blade. Then Volsung tried, and Volsung could not move it. One after the other, his 11 sons strained to draw out the stranger's sword. At last it came to the turn of the youngest, to Sigmund, to try. And when Sigmund laid his hand on the broad hilt and drew it, behold, the sword came with his hand, and once again the hall was brightened with its marvelous brightness. It was a wondrous sword, a sword made out of better metal, and by smiths more cunning than any known. All envied Sigmund that he had, won for himself that wonder, weapon. King Siggeir looked on it with greedy eyes. "I will give thee its weight in gold for that sword, good brother," he said. But Sigmund said to him proudly, "If the sword was for thy hand, thou shouldst have won it. The sword was not for thine, but for a Volsung's hand." And Signy, looking at King Siggeir, saw a look of deeper evil come into his face. She knew that hatred for all the Volsung race was in his heart. But at the end of the feast she was wed to King Siggeir, and the next day she left the hall of the Branstock, and went with him down to where his great painted ship was drawn up on the beach. And when they were parting from her, her father and her brothers, King Siggeir invited them to come to his country, as friends visiting friends and kinsmen visiting kinsmen, and look on Signy again. And he stood on the beach, and would not go on board his ship until each and all of the Volsungs gave their word that they would visit Signy and him in his own land. "And when thou comest," he said to Sigmund, "be sure thou dost bring with thee the mighty sword that thou didst win." All this was thought of by Sigurd, the son of Sigmund, as he rode toward the fringe of the forest. Time came for Volsung and his sons to redeem the promise they made to King Siggeir. They made ready their ship, and they sailed from the land where stood the hall of the Branstock, and they landed on the coast of King Siggeir's country, and they drew their ship up on the beach, and they made their camp there, intending to come to the king's hall in the broad light of the day. But in the half-light of the dawn one came to the Volsung ship. A cloak and hood covered the figure, but Sigmund, who was the watcher, knew who it was, Signy. He said, and Signy asked that her father and her brothers be awakened, until she would speak to them of a treason that was brewed against them. "King Siggeir has made ready a great army against your coming," she told them. "He hates the Volsungs, the branch as well as the root, and it is his plan to fall upon you, my father and my brothers, with his great army, and slay you all. And he would possess himself of Gram, Sigmund's wonder, sword. Therefore, I say to you, O Volsungs, draw your ship into the sea, and sail from the land where such treachery can be. But Volsung, her father, would not listen. The Volsungs do not depart like broken men from a land they have brought their ship to. He said, We gave, each and all, the word that we would visit King Siggeir, and visit him we will. And if he is a dastard, and would fall upon us, why we are the unbeaten Volsungs, and we will fight against him and his army, and slay him, and bear you back with us to the hall of the Branstock. The day widens now, and we shall go to the hall. Signy would have spoken of the great army King Siggeir had gathered, but she knew that the Volsungs never hearkened to talk of odds. She spoke no more, but bowed her head and went back to King Siggeir's hall. Siggeir knew that Signy had been to warn her father and her brothers. He called the men he had gathered, and he posted them cunningly in the way the Volsungs would come. Then he sent one to the ship with a message of welcome. As they left their ship, the army of King Siggeir fell upon the Volsungs and their followers. Very fierce was the battle that was waged on the beach, and many a one of King Siggeir's fierce fighters went down before the fearless ones that made Volsung's company. But at last Volsung himself was slain, and his 11 sons were taken captive, and Gram, his mighty sword, was taken out of Sigmund's hands. They were brought before King Siggeir in his hall, the 11 Volsung princes. Siggeir laughed to see them before him. Ye are not in the hall of the Branstock now, to dishonor me with black looks and scornful words. He said, And a harder task will be given you than that of drawing a sword out of a treat, runk. Before set of sun, I will see you hewn to pieces with the sword. Then Signy, who was there, stood up with her white face and her wide eyes, and she said, I pray not for longer life for my brothers, for well I know that my prayers would avail them naught. But dost thou not heed the proverb, Siggeir sweet to the eye, as long as the eye can see? And Siggeir laughed his evil laugh when he heard her. I, my queen, he said, sweet to the eye, as long as the eye may see their torments. They shall not die at once, nor all together. I will let them see each other die. So Siggeir gave a new order to his dastard troops. The order was that the 11 brothers should be taken into the depths of the forest, and chained to great beams and left there. This was done with the 11 sons of Volsung. The next day, one who had watched and who was faithful to Signy came, and Signy said to him, What has befallen my brothers? And the watcher said, A great wolf came to where the chained men are, and fell upon the first of them, and devoured him. When Signy heard this, no tears came from her eyes, but that which was hard around her heart became harder. She said, Go again, and watch what befalls. And the watcher came the second time, and said, The second of your brothers has been devoured by the wolf. Signy shed no tears this time either, and again that which was hard around her heart became harder. And every day the watcher came, and he told her what had befallen her brothers. And it came to the time when but one of her brothers was left alive, Sigmund, the youngest. Then said Signy, Not without device are we left at the end. I have thought of what is to be done. Take a pot of honey to where he is chained, and smear Sigmund's face with the honey. The watcher did as Signy bade him. Again the great wolf came along the forest ways to where Sigmund was chained. When she snuffed over him, she found the honey upon his face. She put down her tongue to lick over his face. Then, with his strong teeth, Sigmund seized the tongue of the wolf. She fought and she struggled with all her might, but Sigmund did not let go of her tongue. The struggle with the beast broke the beam to which he was chained. Then Sigmund seized the wolf with his hands and tore her jaws apart. The watcher saw this happening and told of it to Signy. A fierce joy went through her, and she said, One of the Volsungs lives, and vengeance will be wrought upon King Siggeir and upon his house. Still the watcher stayed in the ways of the forest, and he marked where Sigmund built for himself a hidden hut. Often he bore tokens from Signy to Sigmund. Sigmund took to the ways of hunter and the outlaw, but he did not forsake the forest, and King Siggeir knew not that one of the Volsungs lived and was near him. Section Roman 4, Chapter 4. The story of Sigmund and Sinfiotli Sigurd. rode the ways of the forest he thought upon Sigmund, his father, on his life and his death, according to what Hiordis, his mother, had told him. Sigmund lived for long the life of the hunter and the outlaw, but he never strayed far from the forest that was in King Siggeir's dominion. Often did he get a token from Signy. They too, the last of the Volsungs, knew that King Siggeir and his house would have to perish for the treason he had wrought on their father and their brothers. Sigmund knew that his sister would send her son to help him. One morning there came to his hut a boy of 10 years. He knew that this was one of Signy's sons, and that she would have him train him into being a warrior worthy of the Volsung breed. Sigmund hardly looked and hardly spoke to the lad. He was going hunting, and as he took down his spear from the wall, he said, "There is the meal bag, boy. Mix the meal and make the bread, and we will eat when I come back." When he returned, the bread was unmade, and the boy was standing watching the meal bag with widened eyes. "Thou didst not make bread?" Sigmund said. "Nay," said the boy, "I was afeard to go near the bag. Something stirred within it. Thou hast the heart of a mouse so to be frighted. Go back to thy mother and tell her that not in thee is the stuff for a Volsung warrior." So Sigmund spoke, and the boy went away weeping. A year later another son of Signy's came. As before, Sigmund hardly looked at and hardly spoke to the boy. He said, "There is the meal bag. Mix the meal and make ready the bread against the time I return." When Sigmund came back, the bread was unmade. The boy had shrunk away from where the bag was. "Thou hast not made the bread." Sigmund said. "Nay," said the boy, "something stirred in the bag, and I was afeard. Thou hast the heart of a mouse. Get thee back to thy mother, and tell her that there is not in thee the stuff for the making of a Volsung warrior." And this boy, like his brother, went back weeping. At that time Signy had no other sons, but at last one was born to her, the child of a desperate thought. Him, too, when he was grown, she sent to Sigmund. "What did thy mother say to thee?" Sigmund said to this boy when he showed himself at the hut, "Nothing. She sewed my gloves to my hands, and then bade me pull them off. And didst thou?" "Aye, and the skin came with them." "And didst thou weep?" "A Volsung does not weep for such a thing." Long did Sigmund look on the lad. He was tall and fair and great-limbed, and his eyes had no fear in them. "What wouldst thou have me do for thee?" Said the lad, "There is the meal bag." Sigmund said, "Mix the meal and make the bread for me against the time I return." When Sigmund came back, the bread was baking on the coals. "What didst thou with the meal?" Sigmund asked. "I mixed it." "Something was in the meal, a serpent. I think but I kneaded it with the meal, and now the serpent is baking on the coals." Sigmund laughed and threw his arms around the boy. "Thou wilt not eat that bread," he said. "Thou didst knead into it a venomous serpent." The boy's name was Sinfiotli. Sigmund trained him in the ways of the hunter and the outlaw. Here and there they went, taking vengeance on King Siggeir's men. The boy was fierce, but never did he speak a word that was false. One day, when Sigmund and Sinfiotli were hunting, they came upon a strange house in the dark wood. When they went within, they found two men lying there sleeping a deep sleep. On their arms were heavy rings of gold, and Sigmund knew that they were the sons of kings. And beside the sleeping men he saw wolfskins left there as though they had been cast off. Then Sigmund knew that these men were shape-changers, that they were ones who changed their shapes and ranged through the forests as wolves. Sigmund and Sinfiotli put on the skins that the men had cast off, and when they did this, they changed their shapes and became as wolves. And as wolves they ranged through the forest, now and then, changing their shapes back to those of men. As wolves they fell upon King Siggeir's men, and slew more and more of them. One day Sigmund said to Sinfiotli, "Thou art still young, and I would not have thee be too rash. If thou dost come upon a company of 7 men, fight them. But if thou dost come on a company greater than 7, raise up thy voice as a wolf's cry, and bring me to thy side." Sinfiotli promised that he would do this. One day, as he went through the forest, in his wolf's shape, Sigmund heard the din of a struggle, and he stopped to listen for Sinfiotli's call. But no call came. Then Sigmund went through the forest in the direction of the struggle. On his way he passed the bodies of 11 slain men, and he came upon Sinfiotli lying in the thicket, his wolf's shape upon him, and panting from the battle he had waged. thou didst strive with 11 men. Why didst thou not call to me? Sigmund said. Why should I have called to thee? I am not so feeble, but I can strive with 11 men. Sigmund was made angry with this answer. He looked on Sinfiotli where he lay, and the wicked wolf's nature that was in the skin came over him. He sprang upon him, sinking his teeth in Sinfiotli's throat. Sinfiotli lay gasping in the throes of death, and Sigmund, knowing the deadly grip that was in those jaws of his, howled his anguish. Then, as he licked the face of his comrade, he saw 2 weasels meet. They began to fight, one with the other, and the first caught the second at the throat, and bit him with his teeth and laid him out as if in death. Sigmund marked the combat and the end of it. But then the first weasel ran and found leaves of a certain herb, and he put them upon his comrade's wound, and the herb cured the wound, and the weasel that was bitten rose up, and was sound and swift again. Sigmund went searching for the herb he saw the weasel carry to his comrade, and as he sought for it, he saw a raven with a leaf in her beak. She dropped the leaf as he came to her, and behold, it was the same leaf as the weasel had brought to his comrade. Sigmund took it and laid it on the wound he had made in Sinfiotli's throat, and the wound healed, and Sinfiotli was sound once more. They went back to their hut in the forest, and the next day they burnt the wolfskins, and they prayed the gods that they might never be afflicted with the wolf's evil nature again, and Sigmund and Sinfiotli never afterwards changed their shapes. Section Roman 4, Chapter 5. The story of the vengeance of the Volsungs and of the death of Sinfiotli. And now Sinfiotli had come to his full strength, and it was time to take vengeance on King Siggeir for the slaying of Volsung and the dread doom he had set for Volsung's 10 sons. Sigmund and Sinfiotli put helmets on their heads and took swords in their hands and went to King Siggeir's hall. They hid behind the casks of ale that were at the entrance, and they waited for the men-at-arms to leave the hall that they might fall upon King Siggeir and his attendants. The younger children of King Siggeir were playing in the hall, and one let fall a ball. It went rolling behind the casks of ale, and the child, peering after the ball, saw 2 men crouching with swords in their hands and helmets on their heads. The child told a servant who told the king. Then Siggeir arose, and he drew his men-at-arms around him, and he set them on the men who were hiding behind the barrels. Sigmund and Sinfiotli sprang up and fought against the men of King Siggeir, but they were taken captives. Now they might not be slain there and then, for it was unlawful to slay captives after sunset. But for all that, King Siggeir would not leave them above ground. He decreed that they should be put in a pit, and a mound made over them so that they would be buried alive. The sentence was carried out. A great flagstone was put down to divide the pit in 2, so that Sigmund and Sinfiotli might hear each other's struggle, and not be able to give help to each other. All was done as the king commanded. But while his thralls were putting sods over the pit, one came amongst them, cloaked and hooded, and dropped something wrapped in straw into the side of the pit, where Sinfiotli lay. And when the sky was shut out from them with the turf and soil that was put over the pit, Sinfiotli shouted to Sigmund, I shall not die, for the queen has thrown down to me meat wrapped in a parcel of straw. And a while afterwards Sinfiotli shouted to Sigmund, the queen has left a sword in the meat which she flung down to me. It is a mighty sword. Almost I think it is Gram, the sword you told me of. If it be Gram, Sigmund said, it is a sword that can cut through this flagstone. Thrust the blade against the stone and try. Sinfiotli thrust the blade against the stone, and the blade went through the stone. Then, one on each side, they took hold of the sword, and they cut the great stone in 2. Afterwards, working together, it was easy to shift the turf and soil. The 2 came out under the sky. Before them was the hall of King Siggeir. They came to the hall, and they set dry wood before it, and they fired the wood, and made the hall blaze up. And when the hall was in a blaze, King Siggeir came to the door and shouted, Who is it that has fired the house of the king? And Sigmund said, I, Sigmund, the son of Volsung, that you may pay for the treason wrought on the Volsungs. Seeing Sigmund there with Gram, the great sword, in his hands, Siggeir went back into his hall. Then Signy was seen with her white face and her stern eyes, and Sigmund called to her, Come forth, come forth. Sigmund calls, Come out of Siggeir's blazing house, and together we will go back to the hall of the Branstock. But Signy said, All is finished now. The vengeance is wrought, and I have no more to keep me in life. The Volsung race lives on in you, my brother, and that is my joy. Not merrily did I wed King Siggeir, and not merrily did I live with him, but merrily will I die with him now. She went within the hall, then the flames burst over it, and all who were within perished. Thus the vengeance of the Volsungs was wrought. And Sigurd thought on the deed that Sigmund, his father, and Sinfiotli, the youth who was his father's kinsman, wrought, as he rode the ways of forest, and of the things that thereafter befell them. Sigmund and Sinfiotli left King Siggeir's land, and came back to the land where was the hall of the Branstock. Sigmund became a great king, and Sinfiotli was the captain of his host. And the story of Sigmund and Sinfiotli goes on to tell how Sigmund wed a woman whose name was Borghild, and how Sinfiotli loved a woman who was loved by Borghild's brother. A battle came in which the youths were on opposite sides, and Sinfiotli killed Borghild's brother, and it was in fair combat. Sinfiotli returned home, to make peace between him and the queen. Sigmund gave Borghild a great measure of gold as compensation for the loss of her brother. The queen took it and said, "Lo, my brother's worth is reckoned at this. Let no more be said about his slaying." And she made Sinfiotli welcome to the hall of the Branstock. But although she showed herself friendly to him, her heart was set upon his destruction. That night there was a feast. In the hall of the Branstock and Borghild, the queen went to all the guests with a horn of mead in her hand. She came to Sinfiotli, and she held the horn to him. "Take this from my hands, O friend of Sigmund," she said. But Sinfiotli saw what was in her eyes, and he said, "I will not drink from this horn. There is venom in the drink." Then, to end the mockery that the queen would have made over Sinfiotli, Sigmund, who was standing by, took the horn out of Borghild's hand. No venom or poison could injure him. He raised the horn to his lips and drained the mead at a draught. The queen said to Sinfiotli, "Must other men quaff thy drink for thee?" Later in the night she came to him again, the horn of mead in her hand. She offered it to Sinfiotli, but he looked in her eyes and saw the hatred that was there. "Venom is in the drink," he said. "I will not take it." And again Sigmund took the horn and drank the mead at a draught, and again the queen mocked Sinfiotli. A third time she came to him. Before she offered the horn she said, "This is the one who fears to take his drink like a man. What a Volsung heart he has!" Sinfiotli saw the hatred in her eyes, and her mockery could not make him take the mead from her. As before, Sigmund was standing by, but now he was weary of raising the horn, and he said to Sinfiotli, "Pour the drink through thy beard." He thought that Sigmund meant that he should pour the mead through his lips that were bearded and make trouble no more between him and the queen. Sigmund did not mean that. He meant that he should pretend to drink and let the mead run down on the floor. Sinfiotli, not understanding what his comrade meant, took the horn from the queen and raised it to his lips and drank, and as soon as he drank, the venom that was in the drink went to his heart, and he fell dead in the hall of the Branstock. Oh, woeful was Sigmund for the death of his kinsman and his comrade. He would let no one touch his body. He himself lifted Sinfiotli in his arms and carried him out of the hall, and through the wood, and down to the seashore. And when he came to the shore he saw a boat drawn up with a man therein. Sigmund came near to him, and saw that the man was old and strangely tall. "I will take thy burthen from thee," the man said. Sigmund left the body of Sinfiotli in the boat, thinking to take a place beside it. But as soon as the body was placed in it, the boat went from the land without sail or oars. Sigmund, looking on the old man who stood at the stern, knew that he was not of mortal men, but was Odin Alf, father, the giver of the sword gram. Then Sigmund went back to his hall. His queen died, and in time he wed with Hiordis, who became the mother of Sigurd. And now Sigurd the Volsung, the son of Sigmund and Hiordis, rode the ways of the forest, the sword gram by his side, and the golden helmet of the dragons hoard above his golden hair. Section Roman 4, Chapter 6. Brynhild in the house of flame the forest ways led him on and up a mountain side. He came to a mount, in summit at last, Hindfell, where the trees fell away, leaving a place open to the sky and the winds. On Hindfell was the house of flame. Sigurd saw the walls black and high, and all around them was a ring of fire. As he rode nearer he heard the roar of mounting and the circling fire. He sat on Granny, his proud horse, and for long he looked on the black walls and the flame that went circling around them. Then he rode Grani to the fire. Another horse would have been affrighted, but Grani remained steady under Sigurd. To the wall of fire they came, and Sigurd, who knew no fear, rode through it. Now he was in the courtyard of the hall. No stir was there of man or hound or horse. Sigurd dismounted and bade Grani be still. He opened a door, and he saw a chamber with hangings on which was wrought the pattern of a great tree, a tree with 3 roots, and the pattern was carried across from one wall to the other. On a couch in the center of the chamber one lay in slumber. Upon the head was a helmet, and across the breast was a breastplate. Sigurd took the helmet off the head. Then over the couch fell a heap of woman's hair, wondrous bright, gleaming hair. This was the maiden that the birds had told him of. He cut the fastenings of breastplate with his sword, and he gazed long upon her. Beautiful was her face, but stern, like the face of one who subdues but may not be subdued. Beautiful and strong were her arms and her hands. Her mouth was proud, and over her closed eyes there were strong and beautiful brows. Her eyes opened, and she turned them and looked full upon Sigurd. Who art thou who hast awakened me? She said, I am Sigurd, the son of Sigmund, of the Volsung race. He answered, And thou didst ride through the ring of fire to me. That did I. She knelt on the couch and stretched out her arms to where the light shone. Hail, O day, she cried, and hail, O beams that are the sons of day. O night and O daughter of night, may ye look on us with eyes that bless. Hall, O Aesir and O Asinir. Hail, O wide, spreading fields of Midgard. May ye give us wisdom, and wise speech, and healing power, and grant that nothing untrue or unbrave may come near us. All this she cried with eyes open wide. They were eyes that had in them all the blue that Sigurd had ever seen, the blue of flowers, the blue of skies, the blue of battle, blades. She turned those great eyes upon him, and she said, I am Brynhild, once a Valkyrie, but now a mortal maiden, one who will know death and all the sorrows that mortal women know. But there are things that I may not know, things that are false and of no bravery. She was the bravest and the wisest and the most beautiful maiden in the world. Sigurd knew that it was so. He laid his sword Gram at her feet, and he said her name Brynhild. He told her how he had slain the dragon, and how he had heard the birds tell of her. She rose from the couch and bound her wondrous hair on her head. In wonder he watched her. When she moved it was as though she walked above the earth. They sat together, and she told him wonderful and secret things, and she told him, too, how she was sent by Odin from Asgard to choose the slain for his hall Valhalla, and to give victory to those whom he willed to have it. And she told how she had disobeyed the will of all, Father, and how for that she was made outcast of Asgard. Odin put into her flesh the thorn of the tree of sleep, that she might remain in slumber until one who was the bravest of mortal men should waken her. Whoever would break the fastenings of the breastplate would take out the thorn of sleep. Odin granted me this. She said, that as a mortal maid I should wed none but him who is the bravest in the world. And so that none but him might come to me, all, Father put the fire, ring round where I lay in slumber. And it is thou, Sigurd, son of Sigmund, who hast come to me. Thou art the bravest, and I think thou art the most beautiful too, like to Tyr, the god who wields the sword. She told him that whoever rode through the fire and claimed her as his wife, him she must wed. They talked to each other fondly, and the day flowed by them. Then Sigurd heard Grani, his horse, neigh for him again and again. He cried to Brynhild, Let me go from the gaze of thine eyes. I am that one who is to have the greatest name in the world. Not yet have I made my name as great as my father and my father's father made their names great. I have overcome King Signy, and I have slain Fafnir the dragon, but that is little. I would make my name the greatest in the world, and endure all that is to be endured in making it so. Then I would come back to thee in the house of flame. Brynhild said to him, Well dost thou speak. Make thy name great, and endure what thou hast to endure in making it so. I will wait for thee, knowing that none but Sigurd will be able to win through the fire that guards where I abide. They gazed long on each other, but little more they spoke. Then they held each other's hands in farewell, and they plighted faith, promising each other that they would take no other man or maiden for their mate. And for token of their troth Sigurd took the ring that was on his finger and placed it on Brynhild's, and Vari's ring it was.